We'll be going live in like let's see, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. We're a little early here. All right, I think it is time. Hey everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this May 26th, 2018. Sorry, yeah, I've been absent from YouTube and Blog Talk and Facebook for wow, it seems like a long time, maybe 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks. But been traveling and not being in places convenient for broadcasting. And you can see I'm back in London, in my favorite hotel room in London. You can see the famous lights behind me that made me look really cool. So as I said, I'm back in London, and so again, sorry we haven't got a lot of podcasts, a lot of videos out there, but you will be getting more. So starting starting today. I'm hoping, I can't guarantee, but I'm hoping to do a show on Monday, then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll see. And then I travel again. So then I'll be thin. So I'm hoping to do a bunch of shows, particularly next week. I'll be back in Puerto Rico and my wife's not in town. So I don't have anything to do except entertain you guys. So that is my plan. My plan is to put out a bunch of podcasts before I leave again to speak at FECon in June, and then to Spain, where I'm going to be speaking in Granada. And then we'll see. And then I'll be going back during the summer. I'll be going back and forth between California and Puerto Rico, and be doing shows from both places. So that's great. All right. Rules of the game. If you want to ask a question, the super chat on YouTube is the way to go. It allows you to make a contribution towards the Yaron Brook Show and all the efforts all around the world in promoting Iron Man's ideas and in trying to get people interested in objectivism. I'll be telling you a little bit about how I've done. So if you're on YouTube, and you should be on YouTube, YouTube's probably the best platform for this. You can use the super chat to ask me a question, and I'll be monitoring that. Also, regarding YouTube, we are very, very, very close to 10,000 subscribers. It would be great if we got to 10,000 subscribers by the end of May. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'd really, really appreciate it. You can go to YouTube, Yaron Brook channel, and just press subscribe. You'll be able to get information about when the show is on, and up new videos. There's going to be a new video going up of a talk I gave in Israel, which I gave in English, and a very short one, I think probably 5-10 minutes talk that I gave. I'll tell you about that in a few minutes. So yeah, let's get on YouTube. Let's get me to 10,000, and then from 10,000, we all know it's exponential growth to 100,000. So this is just step one towards getting to Dave Rubin numbers, I guess. Um, what else? Of course, Patreon. We're doing well on Patreon, but the next goal is to get to 500 patrons. So we're right now at about 420. So you can contribute $1 a month. You can contribute $1,000 a month or $2,500 a month, whatever you want. But would love to have you on board. Support both the shows and all of my lecturing all over the world. So my talks in Israel, here in the UK. I'm going to tell you about those talks in a minute. And then back in the US, I'm speaking to hundreds of students at the in June, and then I'm going to be talking. I'll be in Colorado in August, and at Ocon, of course, in July. So funding both my talks in the U.S. and really globally. So help me do that. Help me keep going and keep the pace up by supporting me either on Patreon. And I know some people have kind of objecting to Patreon because Patreon has bumped people off. Or you can, if you don't want to do Patreon, you can go to PayPal. PayPal.me/Yaron Brook Show. So please support the show on there. We're trying to get to 500 patrons, and then of course the next number will be 1,000. But let's see how quickly, maybe by the end of June we can get to 500 patrons. That would be really, really cool by the beginning of Ocon. If 10% of the people who listen to the show became patrons of the show, we would easily be there. So if you're part of the 95% of the people listening to the show who have not yet become a patron of the show, please do so. Patreon.com, Yaron Brook Show, /Yaron Brook Show. All right, where have I been? I started the trip out in Monaco. I actually spent 2 nights in Monte Carlo, and Monaco's pretty cool. First time I've been kind of that part of the south of France, and it is beautiful. You guys need to get out a little bit. You guys need to see the world. It is beautiful over there, and particularly what's fascinating about Monaco. Monaco is tiny, 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 and it's a tax haven. Not for Americans. We're screwed because we have to pay taxes on global income, unless you're in Puerto Rico. But put that aside, you have to pay taxes, federal taxes on your global income. But for Europeans, it is a tax haven, and wow. High-rise buildings, because it's tiny, so they have to condense tons of people, all the people trying to get away from not paying taxes. All these people crammed into this tiny little space of skyscrapers of condos. It reminds me a little bit of Hong Kong, but just smaller and more condensed. And of course, the Mediterranean is there. And the Mediterranean is my favorite sea. I grew up on the Mediterranean, and it was just beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous place. And again, fascinating to see what happens when you provide people with a tax haven. And hey, the Lisp monkey just gave 50 New Zealand dollars. Don't know how much that's worth in American dollars, and he doesn't even have a question. So thank you, Lisp monkey, on Super Chat on YouTube. So when you provide people with the right incentives, man, the growth, the it's almost all residential, but there are some, I guess, bank entities, financial entities, some people are consulting businesses. And then if you, just as a travel guide, if you travel outside of Monaco, if you go along the coast, wow, the views there. We went to a place called Ez, and we ate lunch at Ez, and the view and food, but also just the views from the top of this mountain down towards the Mediterranean. I just wish it had been a little warmer and I could have swum in the Mediterranean. I guess I missed the warm seas of the Mediterranean. All right, so from there, I went to Israel and saw family and spent time with family. But let's see, 4 talks. And I'll quickly go over them and tell you what you can expect in terms of video. Because I think I did 3 of them in English, and you could expect videos of 2 of them. I did 2 talks, one at the Technion, the Israeli Institute of Technology, which is Brandon just submitted a question. I'll get to your question, I promise, before the end of the show. So I Technion, which is my alma mater, where I got my engineering degree in Israel, and I spoke there on inequality. It was an interesting group because it was a lot of parents, friends. I guess my parents were pretty proud to invite all their friends to my talk, even though they probably just didn't agree with anything I said, but they liked the fact that I'm articulate. But I gave a talk on inequality, a lot of skepticism, but from the audience. Among the older people, the younger people seem much, much more receptive. Then from there, and actually that morning I did an interview for Radio Jerusalem. Then I did the talk. Then I drove down to Tel Aviv, did an interview on television on I-24, and you can actually find the interview on my Facebook page. I posted it on the Facebook page. I'll also try to post it on my YouTube channel, but you can definitely get it on Facebook. And it's actually a really good interview, so I encourage you to watch it. Particularly, and I'll talk again about this later, particularly all of you who are confused about trade deficits and tariffs and all of that crap, I guess. I really go after it, and try to educate the Israeli public. Actually, it's not broadcast in Israel; it's broadcast all over the world. And I guess just mostly Jews watch it all over the world. But yeah, really quick 5-minute education in why trade deficits, and I will only say, and I'll keep repeating this forever, trade deficits do not matter. They do not make one iota difference. Where car is made and who buys which car makes no difference. We'll get to that maybe when we talk about Trump's new idea of 25% tariffs on automobiles imported into the U.S. in the name of national security. Beautiful, just beautiful. The national security need of for what, for building cars in the United States. It's essential for self-defense. So I did that television. Then I drove down to the south of Israel, Beersheba. It was a long day, and in Beersheba I gave another talk on inequality. This time it was almost all students, great audience, and everywhere I went in Israel. And this is, I have to tell you, this is the most fulfilling part of my job. Is everywhere I went in Israel, people came up to me and said that they discovered me either through Dave Rubin, or they had attended some debate I did in the past in Israel, or a random talk I gave in Israel years ago. And as a consequence of those things, they have read Ayn Rand, and now they follow me, and their lives have changed. And I got this beautiful, really nice note from one guy, thanking me for changing his life and everything. And probably more so in terms of the number of people who came up and said that to me this trip in Israel than any other place I've been. So Dave Rubin, thank you for interviewing me, because you brought these ideas to a lot of people who were not exposed to them in the past. But it's more than that. It's being out there, right? It's being out there to really change the world. You have to be out there, engaged with people, and yeah, YouTube is great, and YouTube gets to many more people. But it starts with the live engagement, and I think the live engagement is necessary. And then I think these podcasts and interviews and things like Dave Rubin and everything else is also crucial. So it's incredibly satisfying. I don't know if you guys can imagine how satisfying it is to have people come up to you and say, "You changed my life," or "I discovered Ayn Rand because of you," or "I now follow you because of I saw a debate you did." I mean, that's the debate, and there 200-300 people in the audience, and you don't know if you've impacted anybody. You don't know if you've changed anybody's mind. And people came up to me and said, "We were neutral when we came in, and when we left, we were intrigued by what you said." It's not that I convinced them. We were intrigued by what you said, and we went and followed up by reading the Ayn Rand website, by Ayn Rand Institute website, by reading Ayn Rand, and ultimately by following you. So very satisfying. And I did the debate on Thursday night last week, or this week, I don't know, this week, with a social democrat. He refused to call himself a socialist, although at some point he acknowledged that his values are socialist, even though in practice he doesn't believe socialism works, so he's a social democrat. And I want to talk more about that debate, because I think it brought out a lot of issues. But that debate was exactly the kind of thing that is so important, because a few people, not dozens, but a few people came up to me after the debate and said, "Wow, we came in not really having a strong opinion one way or the other, or leaning a little bit towards the opposition. And what you said makes sense. What do we read? Where do we go? What do we do?" and it's great. Wow. I mean, that again. That's what you do these things for. For each one of those, I said, you make my day. This is what it's like. Um, I'm happy. I'm thrilled. And then on Wednesday, and I'll get back to the debate in a minute because there's a lot of things we can talk about from the debate. And then on Wednesday, I spoke at an event we do every year in Israel. It's an event, and by the way, it's organized by Boaz Arad, who runs the Ayn Rand Center Israel, and who's a longtime friend. I've known Boaz since the early 1980s, and Boaz also put together all the other events, or most of the other events for me when I travel in Israel, and he runs the activities over there. But the event we do every year is called the Atlas Award for Best Startup in Israel, and it's got Ayn Rand's name all over the place and everywhere, and it's held every year at the Israeli Stock Exchange, at the building of the Stock Exchange, and it's fabulous. You drive up to the stock, big billboard outside, and it's got the Atlas event, the Atlas Award, and it's got Ayn Rand's name there, and it's got a picture of the sculpture of Atlas Shrugged, which is the sculpture that the winner gets. And many of the leading venture capitalists, many of the leading entrepreneurs attend. 20 finalist companies, of which we chose 4 winners in 4 different categories, and of the 4, we then chose 1 winner, and the 1 winner got the sculpture. And what a fun event! What a celebration! I mean, we're so negative, and everything we do, particularly as I don't know, objectivists and podcasters and everything, is always how bad the world is and how bad this is and how bad that is. And this was a celebration of life, a celebration of people who are actually doing important things in the world and who are changing our lives and are gonna make our lives better in significant, substantial way. And the entrepreneurial community in Israel is second only to Silicon Valley. It is dynamic, it is exciting, and let me say right out, I don't care if they're leftists. They are changing the world and they're making my life better. And I want to go. We'll get back to the whole issue of what is a leftist. But it's just so exciting to be around people who are so creative, so dynamic, so uh, uh, changing the world, and so productive. Productiveness is a primary virtue in objectivism, and people who are productive. Wow, I mean, I love being around people like that, and people who can think and have to think, because you can't innovate the kind of innovations they involve without using your mind, without using your reason, without being rational. So yeah, a great event, a lot of people, very exciting. The winner was the ultimate winner was a company that designs lasers, cheap lasers, and the software that goes over the lasers to analyze the data from the lasers for autonomous vehicles, so for cars. And they've got to deal with BMW, and they put the lasers in the front of the car, and ultimately they'll be on the sides and on the back, and they will feed the data about what the environment's like. So the car of the future will have cameras on all sides. It will have lasers on all sides, and then and those will basically collect the data about what's going on in real time around the vehicle, what's approaching, what are the boundaries and everything like that. And then on top of that, there is a layer that is software that runs the car, that actually drives the car. And it uses that data to decide whether to accelerate, whether to brake, whether to continue at the same pace, whether to veer right, whether to veer left. And of course, that is also connected to the mapping software that is guiding it all, with Google Maps or whatever they use, Waze or whatever. So they have the best technology in the world for this. They are they've just cut a deal with BMW. They're going to be in BMW cars very, very soon. It's just exciting. And the guy was saying, 1.6 million people, I think, die every year in car accidents around the world. If computers run our cars, the chances of car accidents will go down fairly quickly to something close to zero. There'll probably still be thousands or tens of thousands, but computers are just better at this than human beings, and computers don't get drunk, computers don't fall asleep. And there'll be growing pains. There'll be mistakes. There'll be, we're seeing that with Tesla. We're seeing that with some other cars where there are accidents happening. But we are going to be in a world soon where you'll get into a car, put in the destination, press go, and basically sit back, watch a movie, or reply to emails, right? And the car will take you there, and it'll take you there with the optimal route at the optimal speed and do it unbelievably safely. And while I have to admit I will miss the actual driving because I like driving, my guess is that there will be recreational places where you can go and drive and have fun doing it, and maybe be allowed to drive faster than we're usually let to drive. So there'll be an outlet for us people who really love the driving part of it. So it's it's a beautiful thing. Now, the second company, a prize for their kind of vertical, but didn't win the overall prize. But I thought actually was cooler than the laser prize. The criteria for winning the prize are very objective, and the committee sets them, and they have a whole rounds of voting. And I'm not involved in that. That's a bunch of venture capitalists and professionals do it. But the second company is a company that puts laboratories in space for scientists to do experiments in zero gravity conditions. Now, they can run 360 experiments simultaneously, and the researcher can basically manage his experiment and manage everything that's happening in the satellite, in the laboratory that's in space, on his iPhone. So he can manage the whole thing on his iPhone. They basically pharmaceutical companies are doing experiments there. Crystal design, all high-tech companies, all kinds of things that you can do things. It turns out in zero G or close to zero G. Much easier, faster, better than you can do it on Earth. So you can learn from what happens there, and then you can design processes on Earth to actually do the manufacturing. But it's stunning, just stunning. And this laboratory, so you asked me, how big do you think the lab is? And I said, I don't know, it's probably the size of this room, something like that, right? 360 experiments running all at the same time, robotically, automatically. No, it turns out the entire satellite is the size of a milk carton. A milk carton. 360 experiments in a milk carton. I don't know. It blows my mind. I don't know about you guys, but it's like, whoa, that is so cool. That is so cool. And this is what's in our future. This is what makes me optimistic about where we are and where we're going. Nothing in politics makes me optimistic. Little in academia makes me optimistic, although even there are elements that make me optimistic. But it's high tech that makes me optimistic. It's technology. It's these breakthroughs. It's what they're doing with bioengineering and CRISPR and gene editing and laboratories in space, and wow, it's just phenomenal, right? It's just and autonomous cars and autonomous trucks. I mean, that's the big one because they're responsible for many of the fatal accidents out there. And I just think there's the potential for an amazing future. And actually at Ocon this year, and I hope all those of you, I hope everybody comes to Ocon. And if you haven't signed up for Ocon yet, you still can. It's at Newport Beach, which is just a beautiful location, and you should really make an effort to come. It's going to be a fantastic conference. There'll be over 500 people there, tons of students, and it'll just be excellent, world class, the best objectivist speakers in the world, and you guys should be there. And it's 5 days of just intense intellectual stimulation, great company, being able to say what you really believe, great conversation, really, really just be stimulated for 5 days. Feel like, I don't know, maybe you're in Galt's Gulch for 5 days. So that's what a lot of people describe it as. A great experience. I hope you all come. You can Ocon 2018. You can find it online and register and get there. But the topic of my talk this year is how to be a rational optimist. How to be rationally optimistic about the future. Can one be optimistic about the future? Can one be positive about the future? Because I don't think it's very common among objectivists to be positive about the future. So I'm gonna try to do that and make the case, not just about technology, although technology will play a role, but a broad case about why one should be positive about the future in spite of the fact that we'll probably lose. But, why worry about that, right? All right, a few things. We've got 2 questions on the super. I think it's just 2 for now. Yeah, we got 2 questions on the super chat. I promised to get to both of them, but let me do something here before I. Oops, one second. I'm just copying the questions so I don't lose them in the stream. Let me say something about this debate that I had and some lessons learned, and hoping that getting good quality video. It's not breaking up. Maybe we're breaking up. I don't know. It looks like it's a little iffy right now. All right, there we go. It looks like it's back. Okay, so I want to talk about a little bit about this debate that I did, and some of the audience response, which I think was interesting, and one can make broader, I don't know, broader evaluations about it. So the debate was with a well-known labor activist in Israel. So somebody who is an advocate for labor unions and is generally on the left. Again, I think he said values-wise he's a socialist. Politically, he's what he calls a social democrat, which means he wants some. This is how I view social democrats, and generally, I think people on the left, almost uniform, people on the left who are not nihilists, who are not the nutty left, the crazy left that just wants to destroy everything. The way I see the I don't know, the kind of moderate left, if you will, the political left. I mean, I think even Bernie Sanders would qualify here. It's because I don't think Bernie Sanders. I mean, Bernie Sanders. Well, let's put aside Bernie Sanders, but I do think this is true of Bernie Sanders. They are all people who believe morally and values wise that socialism is the ideal. They're all people who would love to be communist. But they also realize that socialism and communism have failed. That socialism and communism are impractical, that they cannot be achieved, that they cannot, you cannot get there, that it leads to death and destruction and poverty, and they don't want that, right? They're not nihilists again. They're not about complete destruction, right? So they're culturally socialist in the sense that they believe those are the right values. They believe they're based on the right moral values. So they're committed altruists. Again, committed altruists up to a point, because they don't live an altruistic life and they don't actually demand that all of you live an altruistic life. So, and this is true. So this is the way the socialists think. So they say socialism is impractical. And then they look at capitalism and they say, well, capitalism seems to work. It seems to produce the goods. It seems to raise the standard of living. It even seems to better the state of the workers, the condition of the workers. So what we really need to do is we can't have all-out capitalism because that's just damn greedy and damn greedy, and also what do you call it? Just self-interested, and to have that kind of freedom, and you can't leave people alone like that, and you can't just let them do whatever they want. So what we need is some capitalism, some freedom, if you will, because we need the just realistically, we're utilitarians. We need to generate some wealth. We can't redistribute if we have nothing to redistribute. So they understand that they have to have some free markets. And this guy, when I debated him, he said, "Oh no, I am adamant. I believe in free markets. I think we need some capitalism." You know, he raised the little plastic cup that was on the table, and he said, "I don't believe, you know, the government should produce this, right?" Now, they can't exactly categorize what they think the government should produce and what it shouldn't produce. They can't come up with any real definition. There's no clear line. Whenever they feel like, they'd argue for nationalizing this particular industry or that particular industry. And that's why ultimately an economy run by these people would slowly gravitate towards socialism. It would fail, and then there'd be a rebound. People would elect people who are less socialist, and there'd be a movement slowly towards more freedom. And then people would go, yeah, but that's too greedy and too self-interested and too much inequality. So they'd adopt more socialist policy, and we'd gravitate back towards. And that's the pendulum that we keep seeing. We see it in Europe. We see it in the United States. We see this pendulum. And so they're adamantly not for nationalizing everything, for taking over everything. They want free markets, at least tentatively, to some extent. They need the businessmen so they can exploit the businessmen, so they can take the money, so they can redistribute his wealth. They need the sanction of the victim. They need a victim. So they are willing to let, and they'll even say, you know, they admire the businessman, they'll admire the entrepreneur, but he didn't build that, so they owe a lot to society. And therefore they have to pay high taxes, and they have to make sure that poor people have a chance, and they play on all these themes. Oh, they want economic growth, and they want success, and they want a good economy, and and they're not advocating for socialism. They're not advocating for nationalization of plants. They're not advocating for total control of the economy. They're certainly not advocating for communism. Now, it's true that logically that's where they're heading. And of course, they emphasize that they're social democrats because democracy is very, very important to them. Now, of course, democracy is important to them in the economic realm. So the majority dictates everything in the economic realm. But in the social realm, there are absolute rights that the majority cannot override. Gays should get married. Women should be able to have abortions. And all that. Now, it's funny because I agree with all of those things, right? But to them, those are, in a sense, sacred. Those are absolute rights, and democracy doesn't apply to those. Democracy only applies to the economic issues. And Ayn Rand explained it. They believe the spiritual issues, the issues relating to the mind and to the spirit and to morality are useless. They don't matter. They're not important. Marx was a materialist. They are materialists. They care about money. All they care about is money. And therefore, money is what they want to control. All they care about is production, and therefore, it's production they want to control. So it's funny that it's the leftists who are truly the ones most obsessed about money. That's why they're obsessed about inequality. That's why they're obsessed about the rich. That's why they're, they measure everything in terms of dollars. They don't recognize any other value. So it's important that, so I'm doing this debate, right? And I'm trying to make them all points, and I'm trying to make the practical points and pointing out why he's wrong. And of course, to these people, social democrats, paradise is Scandinavia, right? Scandinavia is paradise for these people. And I see Carl Svenberg is watching this on Facebook, so he'll appreciate this. Sweden and Norway and Denmark and Finland, which they don't know isn't Scandinavia, but they lump in together. What the hell that is heaven to them. That is the best in the world, right? They have big labor unions, and they are known to be social democracies with huge redistribution of wealth and thriving economies and happy people. Everybody in Denmark and Sweden walks around with a big smile on their face, and they're rich, they're happy, they're successful. And then I point out a few things to them, which I did in this debate. I point out that they're not that rich. Indeed, most Scandinavian countries, with the exception of Norway because of the oil, most Scandinavian countries would be in like the 40th wealthiest state in the United States. So yeah, they're richer than Mississippi, but they're much poorer than most other states in the United States, and most states in the United States. So on average, they're poorer than Americans, and they're definitely much poorer than 40 of the states, right? Second, none of these states are socialist by a long shot, right? If you look at the Economic Freedom Index, some of them rank higher than the United States, right? Or at least about the same level of the United States. Now, the United States is not capitalist, but the United States is certainly not socialist. They're mixed economies. They're mixed economies that actually, in some respects, for example, in some respects, they protect property rights more than the United States does, particularly post-Obama. In other respects, they regulate some industries less than the United States does. Yes, they redistribute wealth more than America does. But that's the only sense in which they are more socialist than Americans. Even on the happy, and I also point out that Danes, for example, I saw the study at some point, the Danes who live in America are substantially, not a little bit, substantially richer than Danes who live in Denmark. Now, there's a selection bias there on top of everything else, but there's also the fact that you can accumulate a lot more wealth in Denmark. The other thing the guy said, in Scandinavia, there's a lot more mobility. There's a lot more social mobility. The people move between the quintiles of wealth much more frequently than they do in the United States or the UK or other economies. And I left him and I said, sure, when you compress the distribution so that the quintiles are very close to one another, because there's very little inequality in the sense of very little difference between the very rich and the very poor because you redistributed so much wealth, then it's easy to move between quintiles. That doesn't take much at all. So, I mean, the bogusness. And then, of course, on the happiness stuff, and on longevity, the Scandinavians live longer than Americans. If you actually look at Swedes and Danes in the United States, they are just as happy, if not happier, than Danes and Swedes and Denmark and Sweden. And they live just as long as, if not longer, than Danes and Swedes. So if you control for the genetic component in terms of living longer, and maybe there's a cultural component as well, and if you control for the cultural component that's related to self-declaration of happiness, then there are no differences. If anything, the United States is slightly better. But I don't understand. I have to say, I don't understand how anybody can be happy when it's so cold. Like, how can you be happy living in Sweden? It's freaking freezing in Sweden. Or in Minnesota. Like, Swedes in Minnesota are happy Swedes in Sweden. How is that possible? I think all this study's flawed because I don't actually think you can be happy and cold. I think the two are mutually exclusive. I am kidding, by the way, just because I know somebody's going to tweet this in a minute. So, so I thought, so the whole Scandinavia thing was interesting. By the way, the debate will be loaded up on YouTube, but it's in Hebrew. So unless somebody translates it and puts subtitles on it, I guess you can have YouTube do it, but it's not very good. You're going to have to learn Hebrew to understand the debate. It was a good debate. So, but, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to, most of you are not going to be able to listen to it. But it will be up on YouTube, and I will put it up on my channel when it's available. Yeah, I'm trying to see. We're translating your video about the Scandinavian countries to Portuguese at the moment. Yeah, in Portuguese, there's a ton of my videos in Portuguese being translated in Portuguese. The Brazilians doing fantastic job promoting objectivism in Brazil. I mean, the The only country I guess I'm more excited about, other than Israel, maybe is Brazil, just in terms of the energy and the excitement and the amount of investment the local objectivists there are putting into getting the word out and getting people interested in objectivist ideas. All right, I want to make this point, and then I'm going to take the questions, and then we're going to call it a night. It's already late here in London. Plus, I'm trying to keep my shows for under an hour. Now, Daron says the cold is lovely. There's nothing, zero, absolutely zero lovely about cold. It's depressing. You never see the sun. It's cold. It's cold, and you have to wear lots of clothes. Who the hell wants to wear lots of clothes, right? The ideal state of man is well. Anyway, so during the debate, people started getting rude towards my opponent and calling him a hypocrite, and it doesn't, and then saying he's really a socialist and he's really a communist. It doesn't help, people. It doesn't help. So, and this I see this online all the time. And then somebody after the debate said, well, everything Obama did was bad and he's a cultural Marxist. And I looked at him and said, do you know what a cultural Marxist even is? And then somebody else blamed Syria on Obama, which is nonsense. The blame goes squarely on Bush for Syria. And then just the attitude, and I see this online all the time, and I see it all the time among people who call themselves objectivists. Every leftist is a communist. Every leftist is a nihilist. Every leftist is the devil. Every leftist is irredeemable. Every leftist is a Stalin, a Lenin, a Maduro, a awful, irredeemable, nasty human being. Now, that's just stupid. And it's unproductive, because we're going to have to persuade a lot of leftists to come outside if we want to win this. And describing a social democrat as a socialist, by definition, is just wrong. Socialism means something. And socialism is different than communism. Now, it's true. Socialism, taken to its logical conclusion, is communism. But socialism, most people hold it, is not communism. And if you can't tell that there's a difference there, then you need to do a lot more thinking. And not every socialist is a nihilist. Indeed, I would say that most socialists, actually, at least most socialists in the past, were not nihilists. Nihilism is a different category, a much worse category than a socialist. And if you're a social democrat, then you've given up somewhat on socialism. So don't call this person a socialist. Now, it's not a matter of convincing the person you're calling, because my debate partner was not going to be convinced. I'm not going to change his mind. But if there's somebody in the audience who is not exactly sure what he's thinking, and he hears what this guy is saying, and some of it sounds fairly reasonable, calling him a socialist, or worse, calling him a communist, does not help our cause. It makes us look dogmatic and stupid, because he's not a communist. It's obvious to any neutral bystander he's not a communist. Again, put aside the logical conclusion of. That's at a far later stage you can make that argument. But right now, what you have to argue against is the values underlying what he is arguing, the actual things that he is saying, not your hypothetical, not your projection of where it would go logically. Now, you can point that out. By the way, if you take what you say logically seriously, then, this leads to socialism and ultimately communism. You can say that. But by calling him a socialist and communist, you make yourself look silly and unprofessional. We have a mountain to climb in terms of convincing the world of the truth of our ideas. Alienating them by, just brushing them all with the same, ideological bent. It does not do us any good. It makes us look superficial. It makes us look weak. It makes us look dogmatic. It makes us look stupid. calling every leftist a cultural Marxist is stupid. What is cultural Marxism? Define. Is there even such a thing as cultural Marxism? I don't know what cultural Marxism really is. I mean, there's nihilism, there's postmodernism, but what's the difference between cultural Marxism and postmodernism? And if you really mean postmodernism, why not call it postmodernism? Are you trying to just, I guess, and it could very well be that there is such a thing as cultural Marxism, but okay, but let's really analyze what it is. And was Obama really a cultural Marxist? What is it that he did? Now, I agree that he was anti-American. He had a deep suspicion and ultimately hatred of America. But does that make him automatically a cultural Marxist? And he was definitely approaching nihilism, although I don't think he's a nihilist. But, Obama's a communist. I mean, really? Really? He didn't. He really didn't say anything that was communist, didn't sound communist. He didn't do anything that was communist. He's a classical lefty, moderate lefty. Wasn't even that radical, other than his hatred of America. So the whole, and of course what it also does is blind you to the sins of the right? So if you take a look at Syria, and I've talked about this, so I'm not going to talk a lot about this now. Syria is a direct consequence of the Arab Spring. It's a direct consequence of bringing democracy to the world. It's to the Arab world. It's a direct result of our weakness in Iraq. It's a direct result of the way we won the war in Iraq. And Syria is a manifestation of that. Indeed, the rise of ISIS is a manifestation of all that. And both of those are phenomena that are a direct result of the Bush administration's strategy in post 9/11. And to just blame it on Obama is just ignorant and stupid. And again, it's like an instinct. Everything bad, it's Obama. It's Obama. It's Obama. I see that now when I criticize Trump's tariffs. People will say, "Well, Obama cut these awful deals, and somebody has to fix it." What deals did Obama cut? Obama didn't cut any trade deals. Not really. He didn't do NAFTA. We have no trade deal with China. Yeah, he was negotiating the Trans-Pacific contract, but we're out of that already, right? And it was nowhere near as bad of a deal as people assume. Although, yeah, you could have a much better deal by just lowering tariffs to zero. But no, the Trump administration is doing the exact opposite. And everything bad is Obama, and everything good by definition, therefore, is Trump. And this is just tribalism. It's just ugly, ugly, ugly tribalism. And again, we've got a really, really hard mountain to climb in terms of convincing the world of our ideas. And for us to be tribal in that way, dismiss all leftism as communism, we can't talk to them, can't do anything about them, they're all hopeless, and to dismiss all problems on Obama and all good things on Trump, it's just nuts and unproductive, and creates real obstacles to being able to convince people. Because this is what I've learned from 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I've really been doing this for 40, since I read Atlas Shrugged, 40 years. You're not going to convince somebody of the falsehood of their own ideas unless you take their ideas seriously, unless you have some understanding at some extent on why those ideas would be appealing to that person. So, social democracy, if you're gonna convince somebody who's like a middle of the road, slightly leftist, social democrat, or maybe quite a bit leftist, social democrat who thinks Scandinavia is heaven, if you're gonna convince them that they are wrong, you have to understand why social democracy has an appeal to them. And you have to understand the best arguments for social democracy. I bet you that I could take the social democracy side of the debate and do a better job than almost anybody defending social democracy. I could probably do that with altruism. I could probably do that with tribalism and collectivism. If you can't understand those ideas, know where they come from, have not respect, but an understanding of the context from which these ideas have arisen, why they're there, and why they're so popular. 99% of the people on planet Earth believe these ideas. Right? We're the crazy fraction of 1% that thinks they're all wrong. The burden of proof is on us, which means we have to understand their ideas deeply, not just superficially, oh, everything's altruism. Well, why is altruism appealing? What makes altruism interesting? How do you actually argue against altruism? And you can't argue against it unless you understand it. And you can't understand it unless you know why it has appeal for people. And this is true of socialism. This is true of social democracy. I mean, communism put aside. Anybody who's a communist, I won't go on stage with them. I don't want to talk to them. They can go rot in hell right now. And even nihilism, we'll talk about this in a minute. Even nihilism, why are people nihilistic? It's important to understand it. I wouldn't give up on a young person who is a nihilist. Nihilist, nihilist, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. You have to, you have to have an understanding of the other side. You have to, to really criticize Kant. You have to read Kant, or at the very least, you have to read serious people who've written about Kant. To go after any of these ideas, you have to understand them. And I'm not going to do that now. I'm not going to tell you, what I think is the context that makes these things appealing. But I do that when I try to explain to you why they're wrong. I try to also explain to you why I think they appeal to some people. But you have to understand. So insulting them, dismissing them, making big, sweeping generalizations don't help our cause and don't help your thinking. Because what's interesting about the world is you have to understand the principles involved, and you understand that the principles will lead inevitably to a certain conclusion. And yet you also have to understand and hold at the same time the context in which there are subtle, important, fundamental differences between all these positions. Between somebody who's between a lefty like Sam Harris and Stephen Pinker, and a lefty like the guy I was debating who is much more to the left than they are on economic issues, and then a lefty all the way out like Bernie Sanders, and even more to the left Jeremy Corbyn, and then even more to the left of that Noam Chomsky. And you have to be able to realize the subtle differences between them and be able to argue against the subtle differences between them. And then you can show how the problem inherent in Sam Harris's views of morality ultimately have to lead to communism, if you want to, right? And I'm not saying they're not radical. I mean, if somebody says if social democrats celebrate Marx's birthdays, you're not radical. Not necessarily. How many of them have read Marx? How many of them know what Marx actually said? How many of them, I mean, there were a series of articles that were published at Marx's birthday about how Marx was right. And in a superficial, stupid reading of Marx, which most of these people have, because they haven't actually read Marx, or they've read Marx very superficially, yeah, there's certain things that he said that seem right, particularly if you've got this conceptual confusion about the idea that it's capitalism. What we have right now is capitalism. And therefore, anything wrong with the system we have right now is wrong with capitalism. Now, Marx is smarter than that, but the people out there are not that smart. So part of what you have to point out is, hey, you're misinterpreting Marx. That's not what Marx said on anything. And point all those things out to them and show them why he's inherently evil and why his evil led to the gulags and the death of hundreds of, of 100 million people. People don't know this. They don't know it. So, that's my pitch for today, I guess, is the enemy. And don't succumb to the enemy's tactics. The enemy likes to, we're all alt-right, or we're all fascists and racists, right? That's their tactic. For us to turn around and paint them all with one brush, is the same tactic, and it's again, it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't work. And when you throw out terms, know what you're talking about. What is a fascist? What is a socialist? What is a communist? What is a cultural Marxist? What is postmodernism? If they're postmodernists, what is that? And who takes postmodernism seriously? And who is a postmodernist and who isn't a postmodernist? And on we go. So there is anyway, there's a lot there, and in future podcasts we'll talk more about it, and we'll talk about the specifics. Now, Brandon has a question, and he's put his money where his mouth is, so he gets the question answered. Can you elaborate more on nihilism and what you counter that with? So nihilism is the idea that comes from the notion that there are no values. There's no reason to live. There is no purpose. There are no values. There is no benefit to living. And this is what Nietzsche warns us about. Once we kill God, once religion is out, once that form of valuing disappears, how do we get values, he asks. And this is what all the, ultimately 20th century philosophers are asking this question, and the postmodernists come out of that. And where do values come from? And they can't come from anywhere. They're completely subjective, and if they're completely subjective, they're completely meaningless, and there's no meaning in life, and there's no purpose in life, and it's in that sense, it's completely giving up on values. It's the rejection of values, and then what that is combined with is a hatred of the values of other people, and a desire to destroy the values of other people, because you have rejected values in and of themselves. And again, I think one has to understand that nihilism comes out of the idea that the only place one can locate values is in religion. The only place one can locate truth is in mysticism. It's really kind of a rejection of Plato without an alternative, without Aristotle. So it's saying, no, there's no world of forms. None of us are philosopher kings. We don't know the truth. We don't know what to live for. We don't know. Life is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So what's the point? There's no point. We don't want to die, but we're going to destroy. We're going to knock down because those bastards over there think that they know what values are. And we reject all values because we've rejected religion and we've rejected the world of forms. And so it really comes out of the attack on religion originally, and the attack on objective values. And this is why Kant is so crucial in the development of nihilism. It's because he, by separating reason from reality, he said, well, thinking is meaningless because it's not connected to reality. We have no idea what's going on in reality. We have no idea what's really out there. I don't have categorical imperatives. I don't know what to do. It's not written inside of me. My genes are not telling me, or my consciousness is somehow not telling me. And therefore, there's no truth, and there's nothing out there, and the world is empty, and I might as well kill people and blow stuff up. When Jordan Peterson talks about Dostoevsky, what Dostoevsky describes is in many of his novels is the struggle between, where does morality come from if there's no God? And of course, Dostoevsky's conclusion is there has to be a God, and that's Jordan Peterson's conclusion. There has to be a God because we have to have morality. But it's kind of upside down. And what they're ignoring is Aristotle. And certainly what Jordan Peterson is ignoring is Ayn Rand, which is the alternative to that. We don't need God for values. We don't need the world of forms, Plato's world of forms for values. Values are what we need to act to gain or keep to sustain our lives, to make our lives better. And where those values come from is from science, from the scientific quest to figure out what sustains and brings about flourishing of the human life, of human life. And that's where they all get it wrong. Jordan Peterson and The nihilists, and again, Jordan Peterson is falling into the same trap. He's saying nihilism is bad, nihilism is wrong, nihilism can't be right, and I think that's right. Nihilism can't be right. So we have to go to the Bible to find the values, because the values have to be written down somewhere. They have to be somewhere out there. They can't be inside us. They can't be something we discover for ourselves based on reality. They have to be out there. He's an intrinsicist in that sense. We have to find them in the world, in God, he would say. Right? So I know, and I'm going to get 200 people telling me I don't understand Jordan Peterson. That's exactly what he says and what the problem is with Jordan. He's right in rejecting nihilism. He's wrong in reverting back to religion in order to find values to replace this nihilistic void, this nihilistic darkness, or in Jordan Peterson's term, the nihilistic chaos. So nihilism is this rejection of values, and it almost always leads to the rejection of other people's right to have their values, and a wanting to smash, or wanting to destroy, or wanting to knock down. At least that's in its militant form, right? And it also represents kind of the kids who take a semi-automatic and go into school and shoot up people. It's they don't care, right? There are no values. There's no truth. It doesn't matter. They're angry. They're pissed off. Why are they even born into this world? Why do they even have to exist in this world? Why should anybody exist? And they psychologically, they crave attention, and they crave power over others, and they go in and they just shoot up the place because it doesn't matter. And it goes back, there's no heaven or hell, so it doesn't matter. And that's the false dichotomy. And unfortunately, I think one of the real harms that Jordan Peterson does is that he buys into that dichotomy, right? He buys into the idea that it's either nihilism or religion. So that if you reject religion, he believes that logically you have to be a nihilist. But yeah, so Tomer points out that Dostoevsky doesn't ignore Aristotle, but he attempts to bash Aristotle as a Kant. Yes, in that sense, yes. He ignores Aristotle as Aristotle. He adopts a Kantian view of Aristotle, and because by that point, intellectuals can't even see Aristotle because of the distortion. This is why Kant is so evil and so dangerous and so bad. He's so destructive, because he makes it impossible to see Aristotle, to understand Aristotle, to get Aristotle. All right, so that is nihilism. Hopefully, Brandon, you got something out of that. Okay, this is Stefan. What are your thoughts on Thomas Jefferson generally? Do you think the Louisiana Purchase was wrong? Also, thoughts on Christopher Hitchens. Thanks. Wow, that's a lot. I'm over an hour already. Okay, let me do this quickly. I mean, generally, my thoughts on Thomas Jefferson are positive. I mean, he was a giant. He was a giant intellect, a giant human being. He lived big. He you go to Monticello, and what a Renaissance man he was. Amazing. He obviously was a flawed person. The fact that he didn't free his slaves is a massive flaw for me. But if you look at his letters with John Adams, if you look at his life, I mean, he's just a giant. He's one of the great giants out there. One of the things that's happened over the last few years, which I think is really tragic, is that some objectivists have come to venerating Alexander Hamilton. And granted, Hamilton is much better than I thought he was, and is better than I think we've historically given him credit. But by venerating Hamilton, they have started bashing Jefferson, and I think that's completely wrong. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong. So I think Jefferson's a giant, a flawed giant, a seriously flawed giant. And I think slavery is the major flaw. There are other flaws in his thinking. He was an agrarian. He believed in agriculture. He did not see kind of the Industrial Revolution on the horizon. He didn't understand the role of banking. In his debates with Hamilton, Hamilton was often right, not always, but often right. On economics, Jefferson was not an economics, but in his veneration of reason, in his veneration of individualism, in his articulation of the Declaration of Independence, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Do you think the Louisiana Purchase was wrong? Yeah. At the end of the day, I do think it was wrong. It is wrong for the government to use money to. I think if people wanted to purchase that land, they should have. A bunch of rich Americans should have gotten together, pooled their money, and bought it from Napoleon. I think it was from Napoleon, or bought it from the French. I don't think the state should be buying land. Now, granted, once they bought it, they did the right thing with it in their sense of they turned it into private property. I think for the most part, so that's good. Whereas the rest of the West, if you go further out west, 75% of all the land west of the Mississippi is owned by the state or by the state in one form or another, whether it's the state governments or the federal government. There's almost no private property out there, which is sad. Okay, I think that's all the questions we got on the super chat. Oh, one more. I almost missed this. £5. Somebody in the UK. Hey, this is great. What are your thoughts on Tommy Robinson's arrest? Wow, I don't know anything about Tommy Robinson's arrest. Who is Tommy Robinson? Why was he arrested? Yeah, I don't know. Guys, again, if you want to ask questions, yeah, who is, let me just see. I think Yaron will pass on a Tommy comment. I just don't know who Tommy is. So if you guys want to tell me who Tommy is, he was arrested for reporting on Muslims. I'm not sure what that means. Oh, you also asked what I think of Christopher Hitchens. I have respect for Christopher Hitchens. Again, was one of these leftists that I have respect for. And again, why it's so dangerous to lump them all together, and also the fact that Christopher Hitchens started further on the left. He started way as a committed socialist and became far less of a committed socialist, far better over time, and actually was very good on things like Islam and things like religion generally. Look, anybody who's critical of Muslim immigration and hate speech laws and speaks out against it and gets arrested because of it, I mean, that's a crime to arrest somebody for so-called hate speech. Hate speech laws are immoral. They should not exist. You should be able to criticize Muslim immigration, right or wrong. You should be able to criticize anybody. You should be allowed to be a racist. You should be allowed to say horrible things about anybody. I'm an absolutist when it comes to free speech. So if anybody in the UK is being arrested because of free speech, I think that is absolutely wrong. So what do I think of his arrest? I'm not going to pass on commenting. I think it's terrible that he was arrested. Again, I'm not going to comment here on whether I agree with him or not because I don't know. But and even maybe he's a racist. There is no such thing as an identitarian other than racist. Even if he is a racist, you have every right in the world to be a racist. It's not good to be a racist, but you have a right to be a racist. Somebody says Hitchens got religion 100% correct, but he was a lefty. Yeah, but he got more than religion 100% correct. He started to get foreign policy correct. He started to understand who the enemy was. And even when it came to economics, he had drifted much further towards markets than he was, let's say, in the 1980s when he wore red socks to symbolize his socialism when he debated Leonard Peikoff, I think it was, in New York on socialism versus capitalism. So, people should be allowed to be anti-Semites. Somebody brought up the Jews. And so, yeah, I'm against any arrest that is based on speech. So I don't know why people think I wouldn't comment on it. It just shows how little you understand who and what I am. Okay, Peterson contradiction 1. This is Noah who put his money where his mouth is. Christianity is about personal responsibility. 2, carry your own cross up the hill, but to sacrifice yourself on behalf of suffering others. Which is Christianity about? Well, in a sense, it's about both. Your personal responsibility is to sacrifice for others. So, you know, you have to carry the burden of life with you. Stop complaining. Life sucks. And Jordan Peterson doesn't believe in happiness. Happiness is something that maybe happens to you. And if it does, you know, that's great. But most people, it doesn't happen to them. So life is a burden. Life is hard. Life is tragic. Life is full of pain. Pain is the essential characteristic of human existence. It's a foundational essence of human existence. He says that over and over again. You have to find meaning in that pain. You have to find meaning in your sacrifice. You have to find meaning in carrying your own cross up the hill. And you have to take personal responsibility for that. So stop bitching, stop complaining, and embrace it. Find meaning in the altruism. Find meaning in the sacrifice. Now, again, Jordan Peterson is not consistent philosophically. He's constantly, I think, contradicting himself. He often takes a kind of pseudo self-interested position where he is advocating and giving advice for people to be self-interested. But then he talks about sacrifice, not just, and he deals with, and sacrifice to Jordan Peterson as a package deal. He conflates investing for the future with carrying a cross up a hill, truly sacrificing yourselves for the sins of others. He conflates the two, and by that he makes sacrifice, the way he uses it, meaningless. But the true sacrifice, the Christ-type sacrifice, Jesus Christ, who he calls the ultimate superhero, that kind of sacrifice, think about Jesus. Jesus took personal responsibility. He took personal responsibility to kill it, to die for the sins of others. He didn't complain about it. What are your thoughts on enforced monogamy? I'm against enforced monogamy. I don't believe that the government has any role in the marital arrangements that we make, except in cases where there is force, except in cases where there are child marriages. I think the government has to ban child marriages. The government's job is part of its job is to protect children, because they don't fully have rights, and because parents can abuse them. So their job is to protect them. So child marriage, Islamic, Mormon, Christian, whatever, Jewish, should be banned. And then force, if women are forced to marry, like in some Mormon cults, and certainly in Islam is the case, it should be against it should be against the law, and the government should intervene. But in terms of enforcing monogamy, qua monogamy, one man, one woman, and that is the only legitimate form of voluntary arrangement. There's nothing in protecting. If the role of the government is to protect individual rights, enforcing monogamy is not enforcing individual rights. There's nothing about individual rights in that. All right. We've covered a lot of different topics. It's an hour and 10 minutes. You guys have contributed a chunk of money to the cause. I very, very much appreciate it. Thank you. Don't forget, as I said in the beginning of the show, that we are approaching 10,000 subscribers in YouTube. So if you're listening this on YouTube or any other platform, please go to YouTube and subscribe. Somebody says, no more American blood for Israel. Let them fight and pay for their own wars. America has not spilt one drop of blood for Israel. So, I mean, that's just bullshit. American troops have never fought for Israel, and they don't fight for Israel. Israel has protected itself by itself. Now, if you mean money, then yeah, I agree with you. The United States should not be supporting Israel. And by the way, what I said about monogamy is not an endorsement of polygamy. It's just that the government has no role in it. I guess, again, unless force is being used, or unless what do you call it? Unless force is being used on adults or on children. Okay, go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. 1, 2. Go and support me on Patreon, please. It's a great help. I think you're getting value for the show. I'd appreciate your support in return. And the more support I get, the more stuff we're going to do, and the better the stuff is going to be. I've got a lot of plans. We're going to be streaming certainly on Wednesday, May 30th, maybe Monday, May 28th. We'll see if I can pull that off. Right now, it's dicey. And after May 30th, we'll be doing a lot next week. And we've also got some cool interviews. I know some of you have really liked the YouTube videos, the YouTube interviews I did, the one with Gina Golan, the one with Ilan Journo, and the one with Greg Salamieri. and we're going to do a lot more of those. We're going to do a bunch of those. Um, my goal is to really interview all the objectivist intellectuals out there and give you some exposure to the kind of depth and breadth of work being done by objectivists, which is really cool. So Patreon, so that I can make all that happen. Yeah, definitely we'll do more Tara Smith. Somebody puts that out. We'll definitely do more Tara Smith as well. We're going to do more interviews. We're going to do more podcasts. We're going to do more lectures. We're going to do more debates. We're going to be out there trying to change the world, being your agent for change. So please support us in doing that through Patreon, PayPal, or Super Chats on YouTube. Thank you all. And I will definitely see you Wednesday and maybe even on Monday. Bye, everybody. Thank